A woman is stood paralyzed inside Angel Underground Station. Her phone is refusing to scan her face, which means she can't access any money, which means her entire life comes to a screeching halt. Late to work, but can't call anyone to let them know she'll be late. Can't ask someone else for their phone because the only number she has memorized is her own. The woman's fingers shake as she hears a loud sigh behind her, and she's about to step to the side in shame when her phone unlocks. And just like that, all her problems and their many dark timelines are popped out of existence by the tiny beep of the card reader. A few seconds later, and she sat happily inside the tube car, drowning out the world around her by watching the sequel to a TV show about the brutality of the modern world. This was an ordinary morning in the year 2025. When the history books are written, they will most likely focus on all of these guys. But their stories won't capture how it felt like to be truly alive in the 2020s. It won't capture the twisted privilege of being the most informed people in history, but be more confused than ever before. It won't capture how bizarre our daily lives were, and yet how normal it all felt. That's why history should never forget about him, or her, as nobodies, who never seemed to achieve anything, but without whom no achievements would be possible. As nobodies who seemingly live inconsequentially in the background, but whose lives secretly move the world. It's the 1st of January, a Wednesday, and this nobody, named Felicity Jones, was beginning her year by breaking all her New Year's resolutions. It had barely taken half an hour of boredom, and Felicity was back to her old habits, zapping from video to video, watching a video while already watching out for the next, always looking ahead like a delirious seaman searching for land, searching for the new, the newer, the more interesting than living in a 3-bedroom flat which she shared with 4 flatmates. All of her flatmates were in their early 30s, all of them working real jobs, all of them were still waiting for their real lives to start. She was going to change her life though this year, 2025, turn it all around. No more fighting digital battles, no more getting involved in elections she couldn't even vote in, no more feeding fat bloated strangers the one thing they crave the most. No more of that. On that ugly night 6 weeks ago, both demoralized and disgusted, she decided to retreat back to her real life, the one that was passing by right underneath her nose, the one she could make a real difference in if she just got stuck in it. So she put her phone away and couldn't think of a single exciting thing to do. Felicity woke up and decided to go for a morning walk. Some fresh air. The air wasn't all that fresh in Finsbury Park, but still, it's good to be out and about. Yes, to be amongst people and nature, and yes, proudly she kept walking and desperately trying to ignore the fact that she was bored as She got nothing out of watching real people strolling in the park, having copy-pasted conversations, joggers jogging. Great, fair play to them. But if that's what it took to live a happy, healthy life, then she might as well end things now. There was no way she was ever stepping out into a cold morning just to run in a big crooked circle. Never. She often thought that life was just not made for her. Why couldn't she ever like anything good? Like these guys, happily sitting on a cold bench, watching the sun slowly roll over in the sky like a fat whore, buying overpriced coffees and playing with their drooling dogs. The world has never seen a more thoroughly dominated species. Dogs have been exploited for so long that through that natural coping mechanism called evolution, their DNA has been fine-tuned into loving the exploitation. How could anyone ever find looking at any of this relaxing? Felicity got up and walked home from the park, feeling even more anxious and depressed. But hey, at least she hadn't been on her phone all day, so there was that. Felicity had cracked. It happened gradually, then all at once. She had woken up and found the morning completely empty. The fire of epiphany had burned out, and now she was left with nothing but having to walk the dry walk. Her phone was right there though, the entire time. Initially she had compromised and only looked up her emails, then googled the weather, scrolled on WhatsApp even though she didn't have any unread messages, and before she knew it she was on Instagram, looking at photos of Zendaya's engagement ring. Felicity felt a little bit of a twinge in her heart, as Zendaya and her fiancé were both 3 years younger than her, and yet they have had full careers and could now happily transition to a more mature life, family life with full confidence that they hadn't missed out on anything, and then raise a few beautiful kids and be able to send them to beautiful schools. And she didn't even have a boyfriend and was already too old to be young, wild, and free, but now she might not even get to be old and boring, just old and desperate. Felicity threw her phone against the wall and half regretted her actions, while the other half celebrated the fact that she had taken action. She was alive. She was alive and she was going to live for real now. One day down and no end in sight. If she could quit being a digital zombie for a day, then she could do it for a month, which means she could do it forever. Way leads on to a way, 1 month to prove it. Yes, just do it. It reminded her of an ad. What was it? A fat gentleman running down an empty road by himself. The road was very long and he was very fast. That was a good ad. What was it called? Under Armour? Google? No. Google. LA was burning, and Yamina was telling her all about it. Yamina was giving a flimsy account of how the fires had started, of how Americans were stupid and deserved it, of how climate change and karma were a bitch, and then back to talking about how the fires had started again. None of what Yamina said was wrong, and none of it was right either. But in her detailed narration, she managed to cover every unnecessary detail, while at the same time skimming over all the meaty, factual bits. Wished she could just scroll forward, skip to the next topic, and not have to endure all this fluff. She had really been looking forward to catching up with Yamina for some time, but now that that time had come, she was looking forward to nothing more than being back home again. At home again, she couldn't think of a single reason not to jump online. And so she did, scrolling past news of Mel Gibson's house possibly having burned down and giggling a little. Then there was talk about Billy Crystal's home of 49 years being affected, and she felt a twinge. When Harry Met Sally was one of her favorite movies growing up. It was one of those few that wasn't ruined by getting older and understanding more of the world, and so she would forever have a soft spot for Sally and Harry. She even thought she looked a little bit like Meg Ryan. When you saw her hair at the right angle and the right light, yeah, she was just as free-spirited and natural. The Meg Ryan in the movies, that is, not the one in real life. City full-heartedly liked the post about Billy Crystal's house and felt a bit better. She then saw that Paris Hilton's house had burned down and felt better still. She then saw Mel Gibson's house had burned down for sure and laughed out loud this time. Karma was a sweet thing. A few swipes later and she came across a post from John Mayer that read, "This is the most valuable thing I own. It's a folder of photos of my father, spanning his life from being a baby, an educator, a husband, and a father. It's the only evidence of his life that will exist over time. When you hear someone say they've lost everything in a fire, this is much of that everything, if not all of it. Just behind the immeasurable loss of life is the loss of proof of life." Felicity triple liked that post and tossed her phone to the side with tears in her eyes. Proof of life is what she was missing too. Nothing she did would remain. She wasn't even close to achieving what John Mayer's father had achieved, and even his memory was wiped away. So she cried for John Mayer's father. She cried for all those people that had been erased by the flames, and she even cried a bit for Mel Gibson. She was back to hating them. Especially that ugly, bloated disfigurement of a human being. She hated how he talked, his wispy, stammering voice, his jerky movements, his awkward pauses, and the audacity of inserting himself into every thinkable thing. He was an expert in fires, apparently, and the worst thing was that people listened. So she hated all of those people, and she hated herself for being part of the same species that was capable of producing such people, because if they were capable of such stupidity, then the human race wasn't all that much, which meant she wasn't much, and she had suspected as much all along. She wished people like this didn't exist, but wishing millions of people didn't exist is exactly what these people wished for too, which exactly proved their point, which meant everything was pointless. It was Yamina's 30th birthday, and Felicity couldn't be asked. She had been to too many of those already. There were going to be plenty of jokes about how 30 is ancient. Yamina would be a good sport about it, but secretly feel the slap of every comment. Then there will be lots of drinks, and a few cheeky lines, and loads of "what do you do?" and "how do you know Yamina?" And these were all fair enough questions, but they were tedious as Why does partying now feel like work? Felicity could see a thin man approaching from the corner of her eye, and it was immediately obvious to her that he had had just enough liquor in him to dampen his crippling self-awareness, and so now had both the confidence and the audacity to want to claim things for himself. The man smiled and said, words to the effect of, "Hi, you alright? How do you know Yamina?" Again, this was a fair enough question, but she wasn't interested in listening to his clumsy attempt to appeal to his man-made image of her. So she said words to the effect of, "Not too bad. Where do you think you'll be in 40 years' time, realistically?" He laughed and said dead, and she didn't laugh and said, seriously, and then they proceeded to talk about how they both feared the worst but hoped for the best. That is, married with happy kids and a meaningful career, but the most likely outcome was divorce and voting conservative. Felicity enjoyed their conversation and asked the same question to the girl next to her, and soon became known as the "where will you be in 40 years girl?" And she didn't mind that at all. The party ended up being quite enjoyable, and on her way home, a young couple was playing loud music on the bus, and she could feel herself raging again, but then she decided to get off and walk the rest of the way home. She was surprised how easy that was, and even more surprised that she could see a few stars in the sky, and even more surprised how quickly the time passed, and that she made it home without feeling bored. Her timeline was filled with Trump and his wife's silly hat and all the tech bros in the front row, and she just filtered them out, marked all videos as not interested, and scrolled on by. She then watched a YouTube video about an Italian comedian who lives in London but was performing in Prague. He made a good joke about becoming a British citizen, which after Brexit felt like upgrading to a first-class ticket on the Titanic. It was a decent joke, but she didn't do it justice when she told it to her flatmates a few minutes later. So she sent them the video, and all 3 flatmates responded with the laugh crying emoji, so it had gone down well. Unlike the Titanic. Felicity did not see anything about a bloated, needy man doing a Nazi salute in front of an American flag. She heard none of the reactors reacting to his actions. She encouraged no attention hoarders by giving them more attention, but busied herself with living more and more of her own life. And in this way, the rest of the month flew by. She had more conversations she actually wanted to have. She tried to meet people she actually wanted to meet. And she got into people's faces when they didn't pick up after their dogs, when they didn't move down in the train when it was clearly full. And so this nobody began to rule the world the way nobodies throughout all of time have always done, by creating a fair space around her that she would like to live in, and trusting that another nobody, then another nobody, would do the same, causing a tsunami that no ruler, no self-appointed messiah has ever been able to stop. The end.